So hello to everyone from around the country and a very warm welcome to you all. We are hosting this event from the National Cleantech Conference HQ in Brisbane, Australia today. So before we begin, I'd like to pause to reflect on the fact that we are proudly on custodial land of the oldest living civilization in the world. So I pay my respects to both the Jagera people and the Turrbal people and their elders past, present and emerging. Today's Cleantech conversation is proudly brought to you by Upstream. Upstream's mission is to make it easy for Australian businesses and organisations to switch to clean energy. To do this, they offer rooftop power purchase agreements with a difference. They are consumption-based, where customers pay only for the energy they consume each month. There is no investment required, zero at the start and zero at the end when asset ownership is transferred. The price per kilowatt hour is also fixed with no CPI increases. And agreement terms are flexible from 6 to 25 years. To see how Upstream can help your organisation or your client's organisation, visit upstreamenergy.com.au. You'll also be able to meet with the team from Upstream at the virtual Cleantech conference and exhibition, as they'll be exhibiting there. And just a reminder that tickets are now on sale for this event. It's taking place from the 24th to the 26th of November over 3 half days. We've got a program of action takers, early adopters, business leaders and trailblazers, some of whom you'll hear from today. And we've got a lineup of over 50 speakers, showcasing those within the cleantech industry who are fast-tracking sustainable growth. They will be sharing their learnings, journey and insights, and you'll have the opportunity to network with them also. Just for today's webinar attendees, we are offering a 10% discount for bookings by Friday the 30th of October. Just use the promo code FASTTRACK10. I'll put that into the chat throughout as well. And that's for bookings by Friday the 30th. So now onto our panel session today, where we will be discussing how to accelerate access to renewable energy for households and businesses. This session will be facilitated by one of our conference speakers, Paul Howdell from Directional. Paul works as a mentor, advisory board member and angel investor with clever clean energy companies that accelerate the world's transition to renewable energy and combat climate change. He takes an active role with teams that he works with, focused on business strategy, raising capital, sales strategy and execution, and alliance strategy and execution. He has mentored teams on CSIRO's On Program, Energy Lab, and other accelerators since 2016. So now I'd like to hand over to Paul, who will introduce the rest of the panel.
Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you for hosting this event today. As Tiffany says, let me introduce my colleagues on the panel, starting with Steve Hoy, who is the CEO of Inosi Energy. Steve is a global utility industry executive, and he's a recognized subject matter expert in smart energy grids in particular. He's a founder and the CEO of Inosi and leads a team developing energy trading solutions using cryptography as a proof of provenance. He has over 35 years experience in engineering, IT and strategy, concentrating particularly on the energy sector, having started his career in the early 1980s as a power engineer with what's now Ausgrid. From there, his career evolved into energy management, control and billing solutions at Logica, PwC and IBM, where he ultimately led a global team focused on smart grids. Joining Steve is Adam Clark, who's the sustainability manager at the City of Newcastle. Adam's responsible for shifting the City of Newcastle towards net zero emissions and accelerating action on climate change mitigation. Since 2012, Adam has played a critical role in managing the council's shift to 100% renewable electricity, including the development and delivery of their 5 megawatt solar farm. He's also just been awarded a 2020 Churchill Fellowship to investigate the best ways cities around the world are transitioning to a resilient low-carbon economy, with a focus on electric transport, charging infrastructure, vehicle-to-grid technologies, demand response, renewables, and circular economy. His study will cover Singapore, Norway, Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, France, and Spain for 8 weeks of learning from leading experts in successful projects around the world. It's an exciting project. Also joining us is David West, who's the Director and Principal on Sourced Energy, and sadly is without a video camera for today's session, but is certainly logged in with audio. David has over 20 years experience in energy and financial markets and special knowledge in renewable energy PPAs, electricity procurement strategy, LGC negotiations, and carbon strategy. He's also registered as an ASIC responsible manager for energy-related financial products. As the Director and Principal of Sourced Energy, David leads a team of top energy industry experts that deliver specialized energy advisory services for businesses, councils, and government, designed to help clients reduce cost, management burden, and environmental impact. So thank you all for joining us this afternoon on what promises to be hopefully a very stimulating and interesting conversation for the many people that are joining us today. Let me kick off, if I may, just by fleshing out a little bit of Tiffany's introduction as to the focus of today. Businesses and councils across the country and indeed globally are under increasing pressure from all sides, from investors, staff, customers, and within the council area from communities at large, to achieve net zero carbon emissions as soon as possible. To support this goal, as many of us would know, big organizations have the ability to sign power purchase agreements to source energy direct from renewable sources. Our focus today is less about those bigger consumers who have the resources and capability to negotiate those sorts of contracts themselves. It's more about how companies and councils can leverage their strengths and their size and help staff, customers, households, and smaller businesses also access clean energy direct from solar and wind farms and other renewable sources, helping them in turn also achieve net zero faster, while at the same time saving some money. And that's very much the focus. So with that as context, Steve, if I could open with you and your thoughts, having spent 35 years in the industry, on the challenges facing households and smaller organizations wanting to access clean energy today.
Thanks, Paul, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the question. And this is very much why Enosi kind of is in business, is about this access, making it possible. So if you think about it, if you want to access clean energy at your place, then the first go-to, of course, is to put rooftop solar on the roof. And I would encourage you, if you haven't done that, that you should do that if you can, because you can generally get good money for it, and you save a lot of money on your own bill. And of course, it's clean, it's right there. The thing with rooftop solar, of course, is that it's not actually available to everybody. If you're living in apartments, if you're a tenant that you don't own the building you're in, all these things make it difficult. And so what can we do for those people? We have 25% of households who put solar on the roof, but what about the other 75%? And of course, all those small businesses who really can't do the large-scale wholesale contracts. So I think that's the kind of the first thing. But then there are methods and means for people to try to get access to renewable energy. And of course, the first things that can come to mind are through your retail plan. Okay, I'm going to buy renewable energy then from my retailer. Well, how do I do that? And there's a myriad of things out there, right? So you can basically buy energy that is offset. Okay, so this is the idea that you may be using energy that's in fact generated from black coal, but you've offset by buying a certificate or some kind of offset that can apply worldwide. We can do more direct kind of offsets, and we have a scheme in Australia called Green Power, which is essentially fine. It's good. It's a certificate system that certificates are generated by wholesale wind and solar farms when they generate, and those certificates are for sale. And there's a kind of unique system there. But because they cost money, this means that your retail plan now goes up in price. So if you want to buy green energy, now it's costing you more, when in fact the actual production of these renewable sources is lower than most of the fossil fuels. We've kind of reached that tipping point already. So this isn't a great situation. So this is the problem I think that these players have. Meanwhile, as you said earlier, people with bigger access can do a wholesale contract, and they can write a contract over a period of time to procure energy from a large scale resource, but that just isn't available to the small players.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that, Steve. Adam, from your perspective, you're obviously at the front and centre of this and have been for some years with Newcastle. You've driven some superb strategies there, building your own solar farm, getting very quickly to more than 100% renewable. What's your perspective on the role that councils can play in promoting renewables across the broader community?
Good question, Paul. So yeah, I guess as you've sort of alluded to, one of the strategies that we first sort of look at is how do we do it ourselves and evidence leadership by moving all our own assets to 100% renewables. Just a little quick history on that. I guess we started early putting in a lot of rooftop solar, similar to what Steve was talking about. Not everywhere is going to be suitable for solar, and often, particularly with commercial buildings and things like that, you don't have enough roof space to cover your full load of that building. So that's sort of what drove us to look at off-site renewables as an option. So we looked at building a 5 megawatt solar farm out at our waste facility, and that was effectively to cover our operations across the board. Moving further through that, we then started to look at diversifying our source. So not just having solar that produces in the day, but how do we find an option that offsets things at night time? So that's where we also signed a PPA with a wind farm that sort of matches our output. So yeah, first strategy there is getting our own assets to 100% renewables, so we can kind of speak from experience, pass that knowledge on to other businesses. We're currently in the final stages of our new climate action plan, and a lot of that focus is actually around how do we help residents, how do we help small businesses, large businesses move on that journey towards 100% renewables, renewables as well. So, I mean, some of the options that we've looked at is, how do we support community renewable projects where members of the community might be able to invest in solar gardens and things like that. We'll probably see a bit more about some of the work that we're trialling with the NOSI around energy trading and things like that. But then there's other options that we'd look to consider. So, using our tendering experience and our ability to sort of aggregate, we might look at solar bulk buys, those kind of initiatives, and also getting like-minded businesses or other sort of entities together to do a renewable power purchase and sort of playing that facilitation role. Yes,
yeah. So there's a lot of coordination increasingly happening, we perceive, amongst the council communities, led not least by yourself. Just a comment to people listening in here, feel free to send us questions in the system here. I'll field them and send them out as they come in. David, you have a lot of experience working with both councils, but also with large corporates in helping them not only on energy procurement, but their broader carbon strategy. There's a lot of commentary around the impact of us all working from home, doing Zooms like this right at the moment, and the impact that it has on our personal energy bills. I've seen research talking about 20 to 30% lift in electricity bills as a result of this big increase in work from home. With staff energy costs included as Scope 3 emissions for many corporates, what actions are you seeing from companies to help address these sorts of work from home energy costs?
Well, thanks, Paul. Unfortunately, not all companies are really addressing that issue at all. So the employees are left to fend for themselves and claim through their regular tax arrangements any extra costs to do with their work. So that might mean claiming about 80 cents an hour or otherwise a percentage of your overall usage. But I'm not a tax accountant and I'm not here to talk about that. I think the organisations that, especially those that are tracking and reporting their Scope 3 emissions, so their emissions that are indirect emissions outside of those associated with electricity and gas, heating and cooling. So those indirect emissions potentially of energy in their supply chain, but also potentially with their staff. Those organisations, some of them are taking action either by simply giving access to a company discount through their electricity retailer, but some other organisations are taking more action in terms of not just giving a discount, but also opening up green power to their staff. And what that means is potentially doing a deal with their retailer to cover not only the corporate or the council's own green power needs or clean energy needs. When they negotiate their agreement, they add on a portion of staff consumption as green power, and they give access to that via the retailer. And some of those organisations also are using a NOSI, like Newcastle Council as well. If organisations go down that road, they typically, at the next time they go to market, they make sure that they include that in their approach to market, and they're then able to actually achieve their staff getting potentially cheaper, but definitely greener power. So it's a very good trend that we're seeing in the market.
Thank you, David. Let me field a question that's come in from Nick Moore around solar farms. Adam discussed or touched on solar farms. And the question is, can you just explain how these work? First of all, from Adam.
Yeah, so I guess in our case, we build I guess you'd call it a mid-scale these days, a 5 megawatt solar farm. It covers, roughly 5 football fields. It's within our operational site at the Waste Management Centre. So at the moment, effectively, we're putting that power back into the grid, selling that energy and using that offset to pay our electricity bills at other sites. But that's sort of an interim step where in future we're actually looking to utilise a lot more of that on site. So charging our future electric garbage truck fleet, putting in battery storage behind the meter there to allow expansion of that facility when we look to build organics facilities and other things on site. So yeah, I guess the quick answer to that is that at the moment we're just selling the power and using that revenue to offset bills, but we're also looking at other ways that we can utilise that more effectively.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Related to this topic, Steve, and related to Adam's comments on solar farms, and other questions come in here from Greg Dawson. What types of strategies do you suggest to lower costs for community facilities such as sporting clubs and complexes?
Yeah, so I think there's one strategy that we'll be talking about a bit more today, and so perhaps now's the time to introduce it, is the idea that that the big organisation, be it a council or a big corporate or so forth, do the deal and extend to staff. And what the sporting club, complex, so forth can do in that environment is add their demand to this overall contract. What becomes what's been difficult in the past to do with that is to actually allocate. What energy is allocated to which site. So if Adam's selling from his 5 megawatt solar farm as one possibility that they may do, then how do we know exactly what energy went to which sites, or perhaps not physically in that sense, but which energy is matched. In particular, once you get to a large number of people downstream all buying from the renewable source, then we need to know how to allocate that amongst people, because at some point the sun's going to set, and we've got more demand than we have supply, and so we have to start looking at who misses out, what proportions. There's quite a lot of complexity in that, and that's where we're at NOSI, we're building our power tracer platform to that end, so that we can do that, and not only say what's the energy match, but what's the price of that energy, and so calculate that out and make it and make that transparent for people both on our application but also on their power bill. So that's one strategy you can adopt.
Steve, that's a nice segue, I think, into the first of the two case studies we're going to look at today. You're going to share some of NOC's work with a company called Hunter Douglas, where they're supporting their staff, which links in nicely with some of these early comments. Do you want to kick off with just sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just talk through the basic idea of this one. So in the case of Hunter Douglas, this is a Sydney industrial, in fact, the global industrial company. And their kind of corporate culture is they're not public listed, it's a family-owned kind of thing, and it was kind of family culture. Join the Hunter Douglas family as their kind of staff, cultural kind of imperative. And in their case, they have a factory in Western Sydney with 800 kilowatts on the roof, which is quite well sized for their demand as they operate their factory on Monday to Friday during the daytime. But of course, that leaves them quite a lot of excess, sometimes even just lunch hour. But it was certainly on weekends, public holidays, and so forth, and at certain times of day, where they're exporting a significant amount of energy. Now, unlike residential rooftop PV owners, these guys don't get 10, 16, 18 cents feed-in tariff, which is way out of the odds over the odds in the wholesale world. They get pretty much the wholesale value of that in a feed-in tariff. So that's not a particularly large amount of money from their perspective, and they have this corporate imperative, as I said, to both improve the planet and improve the lives for their staff. So what they've decided to do is to effectively allow the staff to access their excess solar. And for them, it's break even because they're letting the staff access that solar at the price they would otherwise get from their feed-in tariff. We did talk to them about they can give it to them for free, but they said, no, let's just break even here. And that's the scheme then is going to allow those staff members to access the energy off their boss's roof. And it's and they'll see it on our application, and so that's really powerful. It's not huge amounts of money, but it's certainly a step for those staff members who can't do solar themselves or would like to top that up. They'll save a few dollars over the course of the year, and they'll be able to look outside and go, look, the sun's shining, factory's not operating, therefore I'm using solar energy. So that's a really cool scheme with Hunter Douglas.
And so what does that create with regard to the issue of them having solar to share? Many companies obviously wouldn't be in that situation.
No, indeed. So, if you do have solar to share, and in the case of council, of course, they do have as well. But in the case of you don't, you're just a big company and you live in big offices yourselves, you don't have room to put solar on any kind of facility, then you can do the kind of same thing in a virtual way by just contracting with someone who does have that solar, so a solar farm, let's say, or a wind farm, and then allow that same deal to pass through to staff. So they may buy energy for themselves and extend that. We even have, we're talking to companies who are contracted for a while themselves, but they're going to start anyway with their own, by offering the scheme through to staff members, and then they'll bring their own load in later. So this is the company bringing its buying power to the game, really, saying that we can bring our customers en masse, and retailers are very responsive to this, right? They're very keen on the idea that that customers will join them and have access to energy that's traced to a renewable source.
I think we've got a question from Brett Mitchell, which I think is targeted to you, Steve, with regard to what you've just discussed, or the principles around that whole idea of a company or an organisation supporting clean energy to their staff. The question from Brett is, how exactly did they facilitate that?
Yeah, so basically they shopped around for a retailer who would do it for them. And meanwhile, of course, NOC had been in discussions with retailers. So those that put forward the idea got the job. In Hunter Douglas's case, they were going to market for their own demand for when the sun isn't shining, basically. And that was a significant size customer. They have a couple of gigawatt hours per annum. So they were going to market, to buy hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of electricity. And so retailers are quite keen to win their business. And the one that got the job is the one that offered the staff scheme with the packaging of Power Tracer. And so the facilitation is really just by asking the retailer, can you do this? And then now it's underway. It's promoting it to the staff, just letting them know, right? They've got access to talk to them and the opportunity to do that. So letting them know, and those staff members are signing up.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Maybe we'll just pause there and ask the first poll. So we've so far had a few discussions there, and Steve has discussed how companies can support their staff and get access to clean energy, either from solar systems that they may have themselves or just simply supporting them with a renewable energy offer that they can leverage their size to offer their staff. So you can see the poll question coming up here. Should your employer, organisation or council be proactive in promoting a cheap, clean energy offer for staff or customers, or in the council's case, ratepayers, being both residents and businesses? What are your thoughts there? Just while we're getting your response to that, maybe if I can have a quick comment. I think, not quite sure who this is most relevant to, but David, I might throw this one at you. For small businesses with leased spaces, factories or sheds, what can be the potential talking points while convincing landlords to install solar panels for long-term energy savings?
That's a good question too. So I think convincing landlords is all about what they can get out of the installation. And so we're seeing right throughout the buildings industry the benefits of having a greener building and what that does to the rental opportunities for that particular building. So they're the things that you can start talking about. There's also different kinds of arrangements that you can come to. There are some companies that are offering a share in the revenue that comes out of the rooftop solar to share that with the landlord themselves, as well as making potentially a cheaper or greener solution for the tenant.
Yeah, that's right. Just while we're reflecting on the poll result there or getting that update, let me pass to Adam for your thoughts on that poll question of the role that councils can play. Let me just refer to the answers here. They've popped up now in the system. Should your employer, organisation or council be proactive in promoting a cheap, clean energy offer for staff, customers or ratepayers? 71% have come in with definitely, 19% possibly, 10% probably not. So that's 90 possibly or definitely, 10% probably not. That's a great opportunity to pass to you, Adam, with your thoughts on that answer.
Well, I think the poll results are pretty clear, but I definitely think that there's, from a council perspective, a responsibility to look at how we can encourage others, including ratepayers, to move and transition towards that inevitable future, I guess. So, you know, making sure that we're also looking at those that have less opportunity to take up those kind of initiatives and what we can do about that. We don't just focus on our own operations. You know, that's obviously important, as I said before, to do that, provide that leadership and also to make savings for ratepayers. But we're also very keen and interested, and the community's told us that they want us to look at how can we assist in moving the city towards net zero emissions. So yeah, we're definitely supportive of whatever can be done in that regard.
And I just love your strategy document about your overall plan there, because you've basically covered off every conceivable area there. It's really quite interesting. Let's keep on that theme, if we may, and discuss the second of INNOCI's case studies here and what they're doing for you at City of Newcastle, Adam. So I'll pass it back to Steve just to go through a few more slides on that case study. And then once Steve's gone through that, I may come back to you, Adam, for some comments, if I may. Steve, you're just on mute.
Okay, so I'm muting at the same time as sharing screens. There we go. Okay, let me just check if you can see that. Give me a thumbs up, Paul. All good. Yeah, so this is the case we've been working with Adam. And to be clear to everybody, this is virtual. We haven't actually put this in place because Adam's still under contract with other retailers and so forth. But this point, what we've done is take a year's worth of data from a number of sites that are all Newcastle City Council sites. Some with solar, some without. And what we're showing is the kind of opportunity that exists, even just sharing it between your own sites, let alone sharing downstream to ratepayers and so forth, and the kind of value that can exist there. And just to give you some idea how the platform operates as well. So what we're looking at on this first screen here is one of the exporting sites, New Lantern Library, solar on the roof, no doubt. And I see nodding, that's good. and looks like in the month of April that we had something like 664 kilowatt hours exported off the roof of that site. Now, what we've done on the platform is configured it so that energy has been allocated, if you like, sold to other Newcastle City Council sites. And we're seeing that on the screen here. So that while the time series data across the middle there is just showing the imports and exports by day, the green ones, the exports, have been allocated to other Newcastle City Council users. So that's what that's implying there. In fact, we can see there's two users, 89% to one of them and the other 11% to the other. The price of that was set to zero. Okay, so basically this is a donation, like across the grid, donation of one energy output to energy input on the other side. So let's move on to the next guy's situation. So one of the buyers, in fact the main buyer, was Blackbutt Reserve. So I'm not sure what's there, Adam, but sporting facility or something. Is that right? And in this case, what we're seeing is on the platform, if you hover over the particular entity, you can see how much energy came from there. So we've interposed, just to be clear, we've interposed an entity called Newcastle City Council. So effectively they've sold themselves and now they're selling back to themselves. But this is essentially the Lantern Library energy coming through. And so for a particular day, we're looking here and we're seeing this is how the energy was consumed at Blackbutt. So obviously you can see the solar profile there as we hovered over the Newcastle City Council one, and so this is, and we can see the split across that day. 24 kilowatt hours from Lantern, and the other 47 bought what we call the residual, which is to say just bought on a retail contract, and the values of those. If we look at that same site over the month, then we can see how much energy was coming from the library each day. And some days, it's not that sunny. So fair enough. But overall, and the overall values, we're seeing that Blackbutt Reserve now has bought energy for $171 worth, if you like, from the residual, but at zero for the nominated trades. And when we did the maths, where we can see that across the month, the sum of what Blackbutt Reserve would have paid if it was all at that residual price, compared to what they did pay, and less the amount that would have been earned as feed-in from the library, shows that the net cost, the sum of those two, is actually 11% lower than it would have otherwise been. So there is a little gap in there that you can arbitrage, particularly if the feed-in tariffs are right down at wholesale, and sometimes you can extract a little bit of value right there. And that's how this one's been modelled. And of course, the extension of this will be to not just sell to Blackbutt Reserve, but to potentially from a bigger facility, maybe the 5 megawatt one, potentially into ratepayers or small businesses. And these are the possibilities in the case. So that's the case study for that one.
Thanks, Steve. And if I could throw to Adam now, just now that you've started demonstrating the potential value of effectively trading energy to a smaller site. First of all, I'd love your comments on that one. And where do you see the path from here?
Yeah, so I guess as Steve's sort of gone through, we've looked at our own facilities and how we can trade between them, but that's also to, prove the model for us to how we could then take it to ratepayers and take it to small businesses and others. I guess we see that it's more important going forward that you're using energy when you're generating it. So, the traditional sort of buying 100% renewable energy, you might buy 100% of that, but it's only coming in the day during solar, yes. Where at night you're still taking from the grid. So as we get more and more solar on, during the daytime, you start to get those depressed prices and things like that. So matching for us is very important. And this kind of platform proves that model out. So, other areas that I consider where we could look to it, and Steve sort of alluded to, potentially our solar farm, we could open that up to sell to, individual organizations or ratepayers through this model rather than just selling it into the wholesale market. But equally, it could help underpin, community energy projects that we could help support, whether it's a, very big rooftop system on a warehouse somewhere or another solar farm or something like that. It sort of gives you that option to both produce and use energy locally and renewable energy. You're on mute, Paul.
Got myself out there with the mute button. It's interesting, that application of sourcing energy from a larger facility like your 5 megawatt solar farm, isn't it? It opens up all sorts of potential in terms of basically enabling anybody on the end of the open grid on the NEM to be able to access that clean energy direct. And it's a lovely segue into the next question that's come in, which is obviously somebody who's thinking about building their own solar farm, possibly somebody from council, but he or she is coming in with a cunning number as opposed to a name. But it's a question directed to you, Adam. How did council go about procuring, developing its solar farm? Did it engage a consultant, contractor, and some thoughts around the contractor's capabilities or the things that you need to think about as part of that process? I think if we could maybe broaden that question a bit.
Yeah. I guess the short answer is, how did we go about it? With a lot of blood, sweat and tears, probably, but we got there in the end. But I could talk for hours about the process, but effectively, early on we had specialised consultants that helped us develop up the concept for the site, look at the connection issues and things like that. We engaged the utility early on, so Ausgrid in this case, to make sure there was no red flags. Because there was a pretty specialised build on an old landfill site, when we went to tender for the design and construct of the facility, we were kind of looking for a collaboration of parties. So, a very good solar design and developer combined with a very good sort of civil contractor that could understand some of the ground conditions, because it wasn't your standard install. So yeah, that's sort of going back to the question there, but yeah, that's sort of what we were looking at for that contractor.
Thanks, Adam. And Steve, I'm thinking this one also is something that's within the ENOSI arena as well. I'm thinking of that opportunity that you're pursuing with the Western Council about helping them build a 1.7 megawatt facility.
Yeah, there's an opportunity in that case. You've got a council in Western New South Wales who want to go build their own facility, so much as Adam has done. But in this case, well, in Adam's case, we weren't around when he was building his solar farm, but in this case, we are. And so they're looking at how to bring it in early. And so the key for them, we think, is to actually engage the community first. So they're going to go build a solar farm. It's going to take some time. I'm not sure if it's on a landfill site, but it's whatever it is. But there's processes to go through and all the rest of it. It takes some time before they'll be able to sell that energy to their constituents or whatever in the council area. But in the meantime, what we've said is we'll get the community together anyway, start recruiting those customers to it, and we'll bring the retailer who's going to eventually sleeve the PPA from your solar farm. In the meantime, we'll sell them energy from an existing solar or wind facility, and they'll get used to the idea. And then later we'll bring in the other generating source onto our trading platform, and the retailer will happily pass those through. And again, you've now got this ability to impact the carbon footprint of your entire community with people joining up. And it's because the council are going to be able to do a couple of things there: not only engage the community, find the source renewable power for them, but also build a renewable facility and guarantee the demand for it on the other side. So once it's built, they already know how much they'll be able to, we'll send demand curves, how much they'll be able to sell to the community. So it's pretty clever way to go about it.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And David, I'm thinking that sort of segueing from Adam's discussion about the approach the City of Newcastle has taken, what Steve's just articulated about a regional council looking at now basically finding a way to prove the financial viability of a solar farm even before it's built by building an energy community supporting both staff and, not staff, residents and businesses, segues nicely into your work with large corporates, insurance companies, media organizations, large real estate organizations, and helping them access direct clean energy. Can you just share a little bit about what you're doing there?
Yeah, so I guess all of our clients are at different stages of adopting renewable energy. And depending on where they're up to, they will have more or less of an appetite to actually start going down this road of incorporating their staff overall in their energy mix. Especially those organisations that are CDP reporters. So, or if they're having to report their Scope 3 emissions, they're very interested in this kind of program. But in terms of an overall picture, given that all the corporates are in different stages, they will adopt different strategies at different times. And typically it starts with potentially setting some targets about where they want to be. They might look at rooftop solar, which again could be incorporated into that program, as we've heard from Steve. They then might look at a PPA, which is typically a longer term electricity agreement, to get some of that renewable energy into their energy mix. But there's a whole lot of strategies that we're looking at for those organisations, and it just depends on where they're up to in terms of their journey towards the transition to 100% renewable, if they want to get there, or if they simply want to be green to a certain percentage. That will drive what kind of strategy we're looking at. Yes.
So to play that back, I mean, they could be working on a PPA for their own consumption. That, or alternatively, if that's already in place and they're thinking about what else you can support them with, something that supports their staff along the lines of what Steve and Adam have just discussed. And it's kind of a variation of that same conversation if they also have the ability to access their own solar systems, I guess. There's a few options there.
Absolutely.
On that same theme, I think it's probably circling back a little bit to Adam's questions or comments about the PV farm that Newcastle built, and probably also Steve with regard to what he's discussed for the Regional New South Wales Council. There's a question come in from another Adam Blakester. What are the PPA considerations for the other sources of power used, i.e. for power supply at times not being met by the export or offset facility? Steve, maybe I'll throw this one at you first of all, and then circle back to Adam perhaps.
I guess so. The question is going to go, what are your options on the rest? Well, that's very true. So, and this is kind of what I was trying to allude to at the top of this whole webinar. That you're talking to, in this case, residential consumers, for instance, and you need to kind of maintain trust. They're saying, okay, I want to have renewable energy, and you're saying, okay, well, I'll match your supply to your demand to a solar supply. So you can't be going and tell them at 3 in the morning they're using solar, right? It's just not tenable. So they know it, and NOSI is very much about traceability and transparency. So Power Tracer does this. It will show you where the energy is matched and where it's not. So where it's not, then you're looking at, okay, how can we fill in the gaps, first of all? Okay, well, let's bring in wind, right? Wind in some locations is blowing at night, so there's an option right there. Not always going to be there either. Batteries, of course, are the next major step in order to firm it up. If we're going to do that, as long as we can prove further back the chain that the battery was charged by solar energy in the first place, or wind energy in the first place. So that's the sequence for us, is to do that. And then the other kind of way to do it is as I said, in the existing means, which is kind of offsetting or using the certificate schemes, which is okay, but it's expensive, and it doesn't actually change really the demand for the energy at the time. So by tracing at the time, which is what we're doing, we're saying in this half hour, here's how much you used and where it came from, rather than saying over the course of a month or a year, then we kind of got this is the part that was generated and so forth. This is it's a much clearer and more trustable approach to things. Plus, we're a bit loath to add to the cost for consumers to these things, but what we do think is that, given we do have these schemes and that there's value in those schemes, that the option is there for the corporate or the council to maybe buy the LGCs that do the offsetting and retire them themselves, rather than try to pass through a high price to the consumers. And then it's just so the cost then becomes the LGC cost, not the total energy cost. Customers are paying that for themselves. So that'll be the kind of options.
Lovely comment come in on that topic, Steve, of doesn't necessarily need to be limited to wind or solar. You could partner with a one of the retailers that have backing with some hydro or biogas. Greg Dawson has come in saying hydrogen energy, pumped hydro, wind, solar, tidal hydro. Plenty of options when you're fortunate enough to live in Tasmania, Greg.
Yes, yes, okay, I'll have to fit things off the list. There's lots of storage technologies out there. There's carbon blocks and all sorts of good things, which can indeed store energy. But and yes, all I would say is that we want to trace the energy that was stored there also to a renewable source.
So yes, part of your approach with NOSI is that you're providing that technology platform to support the retailers who ultimately will do what they do now. They'll provide the actual energy contract to the resident or the business. And that, of course, I'm leading towards our second poll question here, because, of course, to enable that Hunter Douglas type approach, or what Adam is considering as a next step of potentially extending the offtake from his 5 megawatt solar farm to businesses or residents in the Newcastle area, and potentially what Greg in Tassie is thinking about for a PV farm, or the others that have commented around their own solar farms. What that means is that the consumer, the resident or the business, will of course need to change retailer to be able to connect, as it were, to or directly to that source, that renewable source. So the poll question here is, would you be willing to change retailers to access energy that you could trace to that renewable source? So imagine, as you've just seen in the Power Tracer platform that Steve demonstrated and brought alive in terms of what they're doing with City of Newcastle, where you can trace your energy to that renewable source and see it live in the system on NOSI, would you change retailers to be able to access that type of direct connection to clean energy, or direct traceability to clean energy?
Well, while we're answering that one, Paul, I might just jump in quickly on that previous question.
Please.
You didn't give me a chance there. No. Yeah, so I think, I mean, in terms of, how do we get energy for other times of use? First thing is understanding clearly when you're using power in the day, what solar can offset and what it can't. The reason we did that hybrid model of getting that wind power is it also had matching for overnight. And we're also looking at battery storage to plug some of those gaps. But just on the other point that Steve made as well, I think that sourcing electricity from renewables and sourcing LGCs and certificates, I think they're two separate things. We do both. We get the certificates to offset our emissions, but equally it's important to actually source the electrons, if you like, from a renewable generator to help encourage, that future transition of the grid.
That's great. That's great. Now the second poll result there flashed up. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Tiffany. So the results there again are pretty conclusive. So would you be willing to change retailers to access energy that you could trace to a renewable source? 42% said definitely, 50% said possibly, 4% said probably not. So what's that? 92% basically in the affirmative. It's encouraging that we've got an audience that is proactive and that is willing to take a proactive move to those retailers that are interested in this new approach.
I'm fascinated there, Paul. I can just jump in for a second. That you've actually got half of people saying maybe, and that to me says, well, it depends. And what does it depend on? Well, we don't have a chance to do the corollary question, but I suspect it depends on the price. And maybe what source and how much renewable and all that kind of stuff. But there's other things. But and the price is the thing. So what we've found is that you can buy certified green power products and so forth, but they're 25% more than normal, and the demand for it is pitiful. Less than 1%, I think, of Australians are buying that. So you need to actually do the tracing, and as Adam says, buy the energy from a renewable source. People don't want to be paying for that extra certificate on top of that. So you need to do that. You need to be able to trace it properly. Otherwise, we're not going to have trust that I have actually bought it from a renewable source.
Yeah. It's a great point, and this will be something, Adam, that you'd be focused on in depth in your work across sustainability and council. That, what's the word, legitimacy, that clarity associated with it being genuinely renewable. Can you share a little bit around that in terms of your thinking around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely important that, to use the term, you're not just greenwashing. And yes, as I said, we've sort of put a lot of time and effort into understanding how and when we use power, how we can directly, source renewable energy to cover that. And then looking also at other tools that you have available in terms of time shifting when you use electricity to match those renewable time periods, which are often the cheapest, and also demand response and things like that, so limiting your usage during certain high price events. Yes.
Looks like we've got time for one more question here. It's coming, it's targeted at you, Steve. How do you manage the LGCs and the retirement of certificates? Is this an additional cost for participants or sold separately? If separate, does this enable the existing gentailers to offer green power products using the same generation assets? A few questions in there.
Yeah, there's a few in there. The short answer, because we're running out of time, the short answer is, it is optional. Right, so this is how you go about it. So the retailer can offer you a plan with or without certificates, and that would be the kind of way for that to happen. If all the sources are available on our platform, then we can make sure that certificates are that energy is not being sold to somebody else. That's what our platform does. It's very much a unique matching kind of tool. And certificates are a separate market, right? So there's that kind of approach, and it's managed, federally for to state as well, for the to ensure that those certificates are only being sold and then retired once. That's the business of funding future wind farms and solar farms, or providing additional revenue so to incentivize that part of the market. Incentivizing the use of the electricity itself is what we're trying to do. Well, we don't think we have to do a great deal there. We think that people want to do it, right? They want to buy from a renewable source. They just haven't really been given the opportunity, and so that's what we're here.
Yes. Might be time for one quick final comment from you, David. I've tended to miss you because I don't see you. So a quick wrap up on the application of that to your larger business type customers?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. So I think in terms of those LGCs, typically the larger customers are looking at doing a PPA. And in that PPA, typically at this stage, they're certainly bundling those LGCs together with every purchased megawatt hour of renewable energy. And so they use that to then self-surrender to the regulator to reduce their emissions potentially. That could be expanded certainly under a staff program if it was allowed by your retailer. So yeah, there is a solution there potentially using that same ENOSI platform as well as your regular PPA.
Yeah, thank you, David. I think we're right at the top of the hour, so let me conclude by thanking Steve from ENOSI, Adam for City of Newcastle, and David from Sourced Energy for some great contributions, most appreciated. And let me hand back now to Tiffany to do the wrap up.
Thanks for that, Paul. Great conversation there and some really good questions from our audience. I just also wanted to thank Paul, obviously, for helping to curate this panel today. Steve, David and Adam, really appreciate you sharing your insights with us. And also to Upstream for supporting this great conversation. Just before we go, I'd just also like to let everyone know that we will be announcing a speaker for the Virtual Cleantech Conference next week from Google, who will be speaking about their 24/7 carbon-free energy goal and the tech and strategy behind that. So I hope that you can all join us, and don't forget that discount is there for you as well. So thank you to everyone, and we look forward to perhaps seeing you in November.